Caged Bird by Maya Angelou.
A free bird leaps on the back of the wind, and floats downstream to the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays, and dares to climb the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on down bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
In the poem, there are 38 verses and 6 stanzas, with a variation of 4 to 8 lines in each stanza. Although the poem has some rhymes, for example, with a fearful thrill of things unknown but long for still, neither the rhyme scheme or the sounds are the focus of the poem.
Maya Angelou's poem compares a free bird with a caged bird. While the free bird flies happily all over the sky, seeing all the beautiful things of nature and life in general, the caged bird is stuck in a herd in a small and narrow cage. He can't fly or even see barely anything outside his cage, so the only way to release his sadness is to sing, and that's what the bird does. According to Ezra Pound's theory, we can classify the poem as a mix between phanopia and logopeia. Phanopia is when the verses of the poem create a visual image in our minds, and logopeia is when the poem creates an idea about something. The poem can be a phanopia because the poet creates an image of a happy and free bird flying all over the sky, and an image of a sad and frustrated caged bird, such as in the verse, a free bird leaps on the back of the wind. The poem can also be a logopeia because it creates an idea on how all birds and all people should be free to choose what they want to do.
Clearly, the main theme of the poem is freedom and how everyone should be free to live the life they want. To talk about the poem, we see that the poem uses some literary devices, such as imagery, metaphors, and symbols. Imagery because the poem creates 2 clear images, one of a caged bird, such as in the verse, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, and one of a free bird. One metaphor used is, can seldom see through his bars of rage. The metaphor, his bars of rage, shows how the caged bird is angry because he can't see the outside world. Symbols are also presented in the poem, because heaps of them can be identified, such as the free bird, that represents freedom, the caged bird, that represents stuckness and sadness, or the sky, that represents the unknown and what all birds want. Maya Angelou, who was born in April 4, 1928, and who died in May 28, 2014, was an American poet, singer, memoirist, and civil rights activist. At the age of 8, while living in her hometown, St. Louis, with her mother, she was sexually abused and raped by her mother's boyfriend. She told her brother, who then told the rest of the family. 4 days after his release from prison, the raper was murdered, probably by a member of Angelou's family. After that, Maya became mute for almost 5 years, because she thought that her voices could result in more deaths. During the silence, she started to develop her love for literature and books in general. In her career, all her poems and productions were focused on the Black and African American culture. Her works also involved themes such as racism and identity.
The poem was written in the United States in 1983, while racism and discrimination towards Afro-Americans was really strong. Furthermore, women like Maya used to suffer even more, as women used to be treated as different and less important from men. Sometimes they wouldn't have the freedom to choose what they want to do, for example. By analyzing the historical context, Maya Angelou's history, and the poem in general, it's possible to establish a connection between the poem, Maya's life, and the discrimination with African Americans that occurred in the United States at that time. The free birds represents the white people, who are free and considered as more important. The caged bird represents the black people, who were discriminated and not free to live the life they want to live.
The cage represents the stuckness, the suffering and brutal work that the black people experienced at that time, while the sky represents freedom, such as in the verse, and he names the sky his own, as this shows how the free bird had freedom while flying in the sky. By talking about the caged bird bars of rage, Maya shows how black people were angry to be discriminated, and how they wanted to name the sky his own, which means that they wanted freedom, just like the free bird and white people had. In conclusion, the poem criticizes the racism and discrimination of Afro-Americans and everyone in the world in general, and shows how black people, or those who suffer with religion, for example, should be free and treated as equal as everyone, everywhere in the world. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind, and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays, and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the shining trees, and the fat ones waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.